Hello and welcome back. As you probably noticed, this video has taken a lot longer than usual to get to. And that's because this game took a lot longer than I thought it would. And since I kept you waiting for far too long, let's just get into Octopath Traveler. The story is probably one of the more interesting aspects to this game, as rather than having one long continuous story, instead you have 8 shorter stories, each one focusing on one of the main characters. Let's start with Ophelia, a cleric who is travelling on an annual pilgrimage whilst constantly having run-ins with this mysterious and dark organisation. Cyrus, a professor of history and the arcane, who is trying to track down this ancient tome. Tressa, an aspiring merchant who is using an old diary she found to travel to locations listed in the diary. Alberic, a once honoured knight from a fallen kingdom who is trying to track down the people responsible for murdering his king. Primrose, a daughter of a nobleman who is undercover as an exotic dancer in an attempt to track down and kill the people who murdered her father. Alfin, an aspiring apothecary who, after being treated by an apothecary as a boy, now wishes to travel the land, lending his medical aid to whoever he can. Therion, a thief who has been coerced into retrieving ancient artifacts for a noble family they originally belonged to. And Hanat, a hunter who is trying to track down her missing mentor after he went off to hunt a mysterious creature. However, after completing all the characters' stories as well as doing a few related side quests, you find out that the stories are all connected through the machinations of an evil witch who is trying to resurrect some dark god. Because you can't have a JRPG without having to fight some godlike entity at the end. And after arriving in the right place and having a rematch against 8 of the game's previous bosses, you finally have all 8 of your characters confront the true final boss in an epic 2-phased battle. And whilst I can't speak for everyone else, I feel the following clip pretty much summarises my personal experience with this boss fight. And combined with all the preparations you may need to have in order to stand a chance against this boss, the difficulty of both phases of the boss fight itself, and the fact that every time you die you have to fight through the previous boss rush in order to get to him without saving. Yeah, let's just say there's a reason why almost half the time I spent playing this game just involved around trying to beat this boss. But after defeating the final phase of the true final boss for the final time, you managed to defeat the Dark God, release the person that was used as a vessel. You see the ghosts of his parents that were apparently crucial to his backstory, as well as some of the stories and events involving some of the other characters. And no end credits. Yeah, for some reason they decided to put the end credits after defeating the campaign of the person you first selected to play. Well, this section ended a bit awkwardly. And well, I didn't really account for more minor story beats. All seem to accurately depict how long it took me to actually play through this game. Quick, let's move on to the next section. The game attempts to model itself off the traditional JRPGs of yore, which seems to be something that Square Enix does quite often, probably as an attempt to satisfy all the people that complain that the newer Final Fantasy games aren't as good as the old ones. You have 8 characters, but you can only have 4 of them in your party at a time, and you can't remove the first character you selected to play as until you've beaten their storyline. The combat takes the form of your almost typical turn-based RPG, with standard attacks, class abilities that use magic, as well as items that you can use, you know, stuff like that. But there are three specifically notable things to this game, however. First is that the game actually shows you the turn order of the fight. Seriously, why don't more turn-based RPGs do that? Secondly is the battle points, which build up either over turns, or you can use items to get more of them that you can use to essentially boost the power of your attacks or attack multiple turns. And finally, and most importantly, is the weaknesses / guard mechanic, where enemies and bosses have weaknesses to certain weapons and elements, and you can use corresponding attacks to chip away at their defences, and once their defences reach 0, they'll be stunned and left vulnerable for a turn. Outside of combat, there are plenty of places to explore, including certain shrines that give you a class ability that you can equip to a character as a secondary class. There are also 4 special shrines that will give you extremely powerful classes, provided you manage to beat the related super boss to that class. Oh, and there are also lots of side quests, which, being an RPG, is kind of like saying that the sea is full of water, like, no shit. The game's graphics are pretty unique. It goes for a 2D whatever bit style of games that were around during the late 80s and early 90s, but it's all rendered in HD, specifically noticeable by the things like the backgrounds and the lighting, and it's done in such a way that it almost makes it look like some sort of pixel art pop-up book. And the music! That should keep him out of my hair for a while. The music is pretty good for the most part, although the lack of variety in the battle themes might start to get on people's nerves after a while, especially people that are living with you and are overhearing it. And then there's the true final boss's theme that's just straight bawling. This game is pretty good, if a bit on the lengthy side. The gameplay is fun and somewhat creative. The story is pretty interesting once you get your head around what's going on. The graphics are pretty unique and something that I personally like. And while the game does have certain difficulty spikes, especially around the true final boss, and the music has permanently driven a wedge between me and my family, I can overall say that this is a worthwhile game, and you should probably get it if you're a fan of RPGs that either has or is considering getting a Switch. Well, that's all from me, and hopefully it won't take us long to see you guys next time.